myself for my 5 minutes of question. And the first thing I want to do is I want to contrast what you have done with what the violent insurrectionists did to us on January 6th. They had a complaint about voting too. They came here to stop the steal, is what they said. They had been goaded by Donald Trump to come and to try to put pressure, coercive pressure on Vice President Mike Pence to reject Electoral College votes from Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, to proclaim a power no vice president had ever exercised before and doesn't exist in the Constitution. And Pence, to his great credit, refused to do it. And you know what? They trashed the place. And they injured and wounded 140 police officers. Now we have representatives from a major political party in Texas representing African Americans, Mexican Americans, white people, Native Americans, who are coming forward to say that their voting rights are being subjected to a gauntlet, an obstacle course that was so precisely elucidated by Representative Bernal. They're saying this is just another dressed-up form of voter suppression and disenfranchisement. I was delighted to hear my friend Mr. Fallon say that it pained him to hear about the history of disenfranchisement and voter suppression that affected African Americans, but at some point, apparently, it all ended. And what you guys are here to complain about, what you have come all the way to Washington to talk about, is apparently just a figment of your imagination. So we can't trust the African American community or the Hispanic community or Native American community or the voting rights lawyers about this. We're supposed instead to trust one political party. And I'm sorry, I don't just trust one political party, whether it's my party or somebody else's political party, because what they want to do is win elections. Now, Representative Bernal, we've heard some attack on one-size-fits-all elections. The claim is that by getting the federal government involved, as the Civil Rights Movement did with the Voting Rights Act, but by getting the federal government involved, it's a cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all approach. But when I look at this bill, it looks to me like that's what that bill is, because there's all kinds of things that are working at the county level in Texas that are going to be extinguished by this legislation. Isn't this really an attempt to impose a one-size-fits-all straitjacket on the counties and the municipalities in Texas?
It is. It would force counties that are small, 5,000 people, 6,000 people, to operate the same way counties of millions of people, and to abide by the same. There's nothing wrong with the same rules. In fact, that's what federal laws are for. They're the ground floor. Otherwise, there's no reason to have them at all.
Well, I'm for uniform rules that help people get the right to vote. I'm against uniform rules that try to crush the right to vote.
Well, there should be baseline protections. There should be a ground floor that holds the standards. But otherwise, the idea that you would force, for example, Harris County or Bexar County, where I'm from, to operate in exactly the same way as a smaller county, sure, there should be rules they all abide by, but that doesn't mean that they can't do things within the law that benefit voters.
Well, Representative Collier, for example, you talked, I think, about the 24-hour voting. There are some people who are out there working double shifts. They're working the day shift and the night shift. The only time they can vote is at 2 or 3 in the morning. If that's a decision of Harris County, why should the state dismantle that?
Because it's not good for their narrative. Let me just tell you this. In Texas, in the 2020 general elections, we had the largest turnout of voters since 1992. And in response, we get restrictive legislation that would limit the access to the ballot box. We saw that what they did in Harris County worked. Drive-through voting, and just like you get the COVID shot. If you get the COVID, I'm vaccinated, we're all vaccinated here from the Texas Democratic Legislature. And if you get the vaccine, you can get it drive-through. And that's all that they were offering in Harris County to address the pandemic. But under the bill, they would allow untrained partisan poll watchers to observe close enough in violation of any type of CDC guidelines. And the governor has prohibited local officials from requiring masks. So that means that Delta variant that's going around would spread even easier under the election coming up if we don't have precautions in place.
Thank you. Ms. Perales, Representative Bernal and Representative Thompson talked us through this remarkable obstacle course that would be imposed under the Texas legislation, making it extremely difficult for people to navigate all the twists and turns of the current law without subjecting themselves to criminal liability or prosecution. Am I reading this correctly? It looks to me like it's a permission structure being put into place for bureaucratic extremism in areas where you've got official authorities that are resistant to people's right to vote, but then also empowering partisan actors to overcome officials when the officials are trying to protect people's right to vote. Ms. Peralta?
Representative,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. It's coming at voters, and in this case, their assistors from both directions, or coming at poll workers from both directions, which is to threaten with felonies and a year of jail time any poll worker who tries to protect a voter, and at the same time change Texas election law so that instead of being able to stay in one place and observe, which is what poll watchers can do now, allow them to roam freely and get close to voters to observe their activities.
I mean, it's just astounding to see this criminalization of the work of the election judges. Finally, Representative Thompson, it was just said by Mr. Franklin that you cut and ran. And I think the word coward was invoked. Are you guys demonstrating a lack of courage by coming to Washington to demand federal legislation to protect the right of your people to vote? Yes.
You're holding our side accountable to the 5-minute rule.
But I've given everybody on both sides some discussion, so I'm going to finish with this question. And if you want an extra question, by all means, Mr. Sessions. So I just wanted to ask you this question. Did you guys cut and run?
No, we took the same responsibility to represent our constituents by leaving. And even though Mr. Franklin may call himself a coward, you know, he don't have a right to classify me as one. Okay.
I'm going to go now to, let's see, Representative Cloud is next. Oh, okay.